A big welcome to everyone who's tuning in tonight. My name's Chris McHugh-Potts. I'm a longtime board member of the Zullo Gallery in the heart of Medfield, Massachusetts. In addition to our special guest speaker, Michael Blanchard, who you can see here on the screen. Also joining us tonight are two key people, Bill Pope, he's the executive director of the Zullo Gallery, and my good friend, Laura Vale Worcester, who gets the credit for introducing me to Michael several years ago. Bill Pope, how about a few words about the Zullo before we get started?
Okay, thanks, Chris. Hi, everybody. I am Bill Pope, director of the Zullo Gallery, Center for the Arts in Medfield. We've been here for 33 years. I'm actually in the gallery right now. We put on about 4 or 5 art exhibitions a year. We have live music. We have art classes for kids and adults. We have a beautiful rooftop deck that we have food and beverage out there in the summer when the weather's nice. And we're right on Main Street. So if you're in Medfield, please stop on by, keep in touch with us, come in and see one of the exhibits. Thank you very much, Chris and Michael and Laura, for putting this evening together. Greatly appreciated. And thank you, anybody who made a donation when you signed up for this class. We're a nonprofit, and that's greatly appreciated as well. So keep in touch with us as we go forward and enjoy the show.
Great, thanks, Bill. Now, as for Laura, who has the honor of interviewing Michael tonight, she retired a few years ago from a career in financial services, most recently as VP of Marketing at John Hancock in Boston. As Laura says, she unretired last year for a second chapter, leading marketing for a startup company. Laura has been a lifelong supporter of the arts in the Boston area and on Martha's Vineyard. She has attended events at the Zullo Gallery, so she is familiar with its special atmosphere. Before Laura takes it from here, just a quick note, we'll be recording this talk for future viewing. So just to give everybody a heads up. Laura, take it over.
Thanks so much, Chris. And we all owe Chris thanks for putting this night together. She put a lot of work into it. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, I first of all, I'm no Oprah Winfrey, so I'm working off a bit of a script, but so bear with me here. I wanted to tell you how I met Michael, which was several years ago, probably about 8 years ago on the Vineyard, where we have a home and my parents have lived for many years. The day I met Michael, my husband Jim and I were on Long Point, one of our favorite places on earth, and we were there with friends from out of town, and it was just this amazing, beautiful day in late September, and we were looking out to the horizon, and I turned around and there was a guy standing by a dune with a very, very long telephoto lens, and I'd been following Michael for a few years on Facebook, and I was sure it was him. So I went over and introduced myself, and we've been friends ever since. I bought his metallic big print of the photo he calls The Wave because of that day. And that's hanging in our bedroom as well as the full moon over East Chop, which is one of my favorites, and the stone cairns at Aquina. And I frequently joke that I wish I had more walls to put all of Michael's pictures in and on. One of my great joys is to walk into his gallery and just see all and be surrounded by his photography.
I won't talk about the fact that I had to take a restraining order out against you, but whatever. Sorry.
We'll talk about that later. So Michael will be sharing his own story with us tonight, but for any of you who follow him, he's not just an incredible photographer, he's an authentic, thoughtful, and caring writer as well. His books, yearly calendars, which the proceeds go to charity, and his Facebook posts are inspiring and are also brutally honest about the road to recovery. I think it's the magical way he pairs his photography with a revelation or a memory that people connect with on a very deep emotional level. It's one of the reasons that Michael has thousands of followers on Facebook and why they come from all over the world to Martha's Vineyard just to meet him. So before I start, I just want to mention that Michael will be taking questions at the end. We've got about 10-15 minutes for a question. So if you have a question, go to the Q&A or chat area and just type it in there, and then we'll take it at the end. So with that, let me welcome Michael Blanchard, and thank you so much, Michael, for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. I'm looking forward to it. So thanks for having me here. It was nice meeting you guys. I'm glad that I know where you are now too. So it gives me a place to go when I get off the rock once in a while. So anyway.
So let's start. Michael, maybe you could begin by telling us a little bit about what your life was like prior to becoming a photographer and an author.
Oh, and when I get ready, when I try to prepare for something like this, it's kind of like this cathartic thing where you get to go back and you get to think about things that maybe you've forgotten. And it's really some of the pictures that I was looking through and so on and so forth. It's been about 12 years since I jumped into this, but 11 years, July 26, 2010 is when I got sober. That was my sober date. And prior to that, I had gone on a bad string of decline with alcoholism. And I was actually arrested on 3 separate occasions in 3 months. And that's a whole story unto itself. But in that process, the world that I knew came to an end. And I ended up facing a long period of jail time or going to a rehab. And, the alcoholism, I'm a marathon runner. I work out every day. Everybody has their own course. If if you get into addiction or alcoholism and you talk to people, there is as many paths you can take to get to the final answer is there are people, but mine was long and imperceptible. It took me 30 years to get to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. And unfortunately for me, I couldn't stop. And society, I used to hate police officers for doing what they did to me. And now I consider them to be my angels, because without them, I'd either be dead, maybe have killed someone else, or be in jail. And for someone like me that couldn't stop or didn't want to stop, whatever, I needed that. So that was where my life kind of switched gears really quick. But I was fortunate that I had some people that stood behind me. And I'll just mention one person, not to get too long onto this question, but I was the chief operating officer of a system up in Maine. And they didn't fire me after 3 DUIs in 3 months. Figure that one out. And that was because there was a physician who talked with me in the psychiatric hospital. I had a suicide plan. I purchased 100 Xanax on the internet and I was going to get it done with. And so they put me in a psych hospital for a couple of weeks. And the physician, who was the medical director, he looked at me and he said, I was just like you. And here you are, a physician who decided to go out on a limb and share a very personal thing. And he ended up being my source of hope. And he ended up going to the health system and telling them that if I kept going, if they supported me, that they thought I could make my way back. And if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be here tonight. So my start into the arts came from a discontinuation of my previous life.
Thank you for that. You've said before that you used photography to psychoanalyze yourself and get back to the world again, to come out of isolation. Can you tell us a little bit about how you discovered photography and when did you realize how important it was to your healing?
It's so funny because people come to me all the time and they say, I want to be a photographer. I want to, tell me how you did it. I say, you do not want to get there the way that I got there. Okay. It's not the right way to get there. But what happened is after I got sober, I was about 2 to 3 years into sobriety and life just wasn't all that great. And I was back at my job. I was doing well, but I didn't have joy. It was just survival and not much else. And I heard a speech at a graduation ceremony where the person who was boring as can be suddenly, and I was zoned out, but just like in that one moment, I heard her say, and you have to go find your passion in life. And then she says, and here's an example of a bipolar alcoholic businessman that found peace and connection and joy in life by the taking and editing of photographs. And this was in a graduation speech. That was the only words I heard in the whole damn speech. And something in that moment went inside and was not going to let go. And if I hadn't heard that talk, I would not be a photographer. I had no interest. I had no artistic ability, and I had no interest in picking up a camera or anything. And in that moment, it became an obsession. And in fact, I want to show you. So what happened is I started to take pictures. I started to learn. I became really obsessive about working out and watching videos and practicing. What I was finding is that the process of taking photographs was getting me outside. And instead of worrying about 5 to 9 at night, coming home from work and trying not to drink, 5 to 9 became the time when I would run out the door and go take pictures. It became my playground instead of my dreaded time of the day. And so as I started to take pictures, I started to do this, and I want to share the screen to show you guys. I found these the other day, and it's kind of like fun to look at them. So when I first started to take pictures, I would go home, and do you remember Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Are people old enough to even know that anymore? Do you remember Richard Dreyfuss when he was like on the kitchen table throwing mud and making a mountain? He was obsessed, and he didn't know what he was doing it for, but it was something inside, and he just kept doing it. That's the way I was. I was Richard Dreyfuss with a camera. And so I started taking pictures, and I would come home and I would stare at them, and I would hyper edit them. I would make them as contrasty as I could. This picture of a frozen boat, I had visions of the fact that I was still frozen, but if I was going to make it, the anchor was with my sobriety. And I used to just sit there for like 2 hours creating these photos. Another one was this. I mean, it's hyper edited. I put everything. I wanted it to be contrasty. I wanted dark clouds. I wanted light. I lived in it. It was like an obsession. But it always had like a bad theme attached to it, like a frozen boat or whatever. And again, here there was another one with a dead tree that I had, and there's one like this with a ramp with the light at the top. So I would dream the fact that, hey, okay, you're in a bad place, but if you can just hang on and get to the top, you'll find light at the end of the tunnel, kind of thing. And later on in life, I realized when I got my master's in psychology that if you look at some of these pictures, these were produced in rehabs where they give the patients iPads to go try to express themselves through photographs. And so the patients would go out and take pictures. And in this, you can see here, for example, stigma, the green apple versus all the reds, and so on and so forth. So the patients would take their pictures and hyper edit the photos to try to express what they felt inside. And here's some garbage canisters that were done that way to express loss and hopelessness. And so little did I realize that I had discovered a way to kind of get stuff that was so far down deep inside that I wasn't going to touch it any other way. And that became my means of self-expression. I never had a goal of starting an art gallery or being a professional photographer or anything. I just started just being obsessed with this. And then eventually I said, you know what, if this is working for me, maybe it'll work for somebody else. And I started posting the pictures on social media. I still as a COO of a lab system. And then I started to attach my feelings to it. And I don't even know why I did it. I was like, how many chief operating officers would be telling intimate details of their struggle with addiction attached to a picture on social media? I still can't even point to why I needed to do it. But that's how it all started. And there was no plan other than that. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
Absolutely. I know you have a photo that with a bird in it. Is that coming up, or do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I got that one here. It's just an example that after I got past, after I started posting on social media, people seemed to like what I was doing. And most of the responses that I got were that people couldn't believe that I was saying what I was saying with such honesty and openness, because back 10 years ago, it wasn't so open to talk about depression and alcoholism and addiction. And there were a lot of folks in this country, everywhere, that feel alone and wrapped in stigma and shame. And suddenly some guys out there that got arrested 3 times is talking about hope and whatever. And when one of the photos, this photo of this little bird, was the first time that I could manipulate the camera so I could make the background blurry. And the bird's looking out into the ocean, which is all blurry. It looks kind of beautiful, but you can't tell what's happening really. It's just, you can see the bird and the sand at its feet. And I envisioned that to be me, that after, breaking down and such, I was back. I had a purpose. I didn't know where I was going, but that is my vision of starting over. And I was telling you guys the other day that I had, because it meant so much to me as my new beginning, that I had a big giant metal print of it made in the gallery. And who in their right mind is going to buy this bird? Okay. It's just, out of all the pictures, it's a bird, but it meant so much to me. And then it sat here and it didn't sell. And I said, I don't care. It's my bird. And then finally a woman came in one day and she says, what's your favorite photo of all time? And I told her that one, and she laughed. And she says, why? And I sat and I told her the story. I said, because it means everything to me, because it represents what it's like to start over. And she just kind of nodded her head and whatever. And then she left. 2 hours later, she came back and she bought the metal print, because it was because of the story, but there was a time in her life that she was starting over. And by me putting my heart and soul into that picture and expressing it to her, she was able to tap a time in her life that she could now attach to that photo. And it was going to mean so much more to her because she had the ability to do that. And that's when I first really understood that words and photographs can become powerful. Photographs are fine, words are fine, but if you put the right words together with the right photograph, it has power that I could have never thought existed. And that ended up being really the whole forward-looking course from there.
Well, that's actually a perfect segue to the next question, which is about Facebook. And so how did posting your photos and memories on Facebook aid your personal transformation and your new life path?
The responses were not expected. And in some cases, it was almost uncomfortable, in that I didn't understand how me sitting in my basement or here and writing words and photos could influence people the way it seemed to be happening. But what happened is the reinforcement that I was getting, people were calling and saying, or emailing and saying, my son, there was a man that was here in the gallery, right here in this room sitting next to me, as a result of something he read on Facebook. And I was here and there were lots of people in the gallery, and I could see him lingering for almost an hour, and I felt bad that I couldn't get to him. And as finally the crowd was leaving, I ran back and said, I'm so sorry. I know I've seen you lingering here. And he looked at me and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, we lost my son. I've come all the way here. He came from like 3 states away. He says, I've come here. I wanted to say thank you to you. And I said, well, yeah, why? He says, because we've lived our life thinking that our son, the disease, causes such hatred and anger that you wrote it. He's saying to me, Mike, you wrote it, that how the disease can cause the person to say things that aren't real, in terms of, trying to push their parents away and whatever. And he said, because of you, we've been able to come to peace that he really did love us. And the disease was what made all that happen. You can't buy that. If you have, to have somebody that drove, it's not about selling things in this gallery. It's about relationships. And to have somebody that would say that to me and come that far, because I wrote some things and attached it to a photograph that brought him and his wife a little bit of peace in a horrible situation. When that happens to you, it's like uplifting. And so you just want to do more, and you want to help more people. And it's just a really cool thing. And it's really made all the difference for me.
Well, it's obviously made a big difference to many people's lives as well. Is there a specific story or image that you want to share with us that, you know, had a great impact on others, or even just a couple of people?
Yeah, here's, you know, the other thing that I found is that if you know, as a COO, I made a lot of money and I never gave anything to anybody. I was like the Grinch, Scrooge, whatever you want to call it. And then when I became a photographer, I started, like here you can see in this photo, this is the Edgartown Light. And all of the stones here have names on them for children who have passed away. And as much as everybody knows Edgartown Light, it's a sacred space for many people. And I flew my drone over the top one day. And when I got home, I saw these roses in the corner. And I was touched by it because I know some of the people that have children memorialized there. And I just said to myself, I want to give this to these people. So I sent out a post on Facebook and said, anybody that has a child memorialized at the light, you can have this photo for free. I'll just send you the digital image. You can have photos made and whatever. And so like 35 families got back to me and they asked for the photo. I couldn't believe that many people were like on Facebook. And a few days later, I got this email. And this was from the woman who had laid the roses at the light. And this is her son. And these were the roses that I could see with the drone. And her and I have now become good friends because she feels like her son helped put us together. And what I realized is that life's hard. But my photography, if I shared it, I could take away some of the pain that some of these families were experiencing, but it came through like just giving stuff away. And it came back 1,000-fold. So that's just an example. When I first started doing photography, the last thing I wanted to do was bump into people. I just wanted to go out and take pictures of waves, like your wave on Long Point. And I started bumping into people. And it ended up being that when I allowed them to be in my life while I was out there, the synchronicity of things that happened from that were so incredible. I wrote a book. And it was the relationships with people that ended up being what was so amazing about what was going on. So that's an example, one that touched me, and a lot of families resonated that, you know, that had lost children. So it made me feel like I did something, a little bit of something to take some of that pain away.
Oh, that's a beautiful photo, and I don't think it's one that I've actually seen before, surprisingly. So you've touched many people by your gallery, your books, your calendars, and over Facebook. Can you talk a little bit about how much that means to you, how helping others motivates and inspires your work and your life?
Oh, well, kind of what I've said, but I think that what happens, so like there are art galleries, and then I'll give you one example. Before I had this art gallery and I was still trying to figure all this stuff out, I used to do flea markets in the fields. And I remember one time my next door neighbor who was an illustrator, and he was keeping an eye on my booth, and he was seeing people come in and out, often hugging and crying. And he finally came over and he says, "What the hell are you doing to these people?" And it's because the relationships, and I know people hate Facebook. I'm not going to go there. I know that if it's used right and you're willing to share yourself and you're willing to, you know, you have to have good pictures. If you take a crappy picture, probably nobody's going to look at the post. They come hand in hand, the ability to put a photo together with words. elicit something in people that that you can touch them, and the fact that they come here. And so my gallery is different than a traditional gallery in that it's kind of like a meeting place where I spend probably more time talking with people about things that are related to addiction and other things than I do about the artwork that's hanging on the wall. And to have that happen is so self-reinforcing. I was talking to a woman the other day that's trying to help teenage girls come back from anxiety, depression. And in some instances, they almost force the girls to give something to somebody else so that they can see what comes back from giving and the way that it brings you up as a person. And that the ability to give away was something I never did in my entire life. And it's been the key to wanting to keep doing more of this, So I guess that's probably the easiest way to explain it.
So changing direction a little bit, I'm just wondering if there are certain kinds of pictures that you enjoy taking more than others that really bring you a personal inner satisfaction. You're not doing it for anyone on Facebook, but you're doing it for yourself. Are there a few that you could talk about?
No. Okay, this is the way it works. I've been doing this on Martha's Vineyard now for like 10 or 11 years. And many photographers have come and gone on social media and have taken pictures of Martha's Vineyard. Most of them talk about, running out of things to take pictures of. I've got to get off the island. I've had enough. And that comes from trying to take a good picture. And I have an ego, and sometimes I get caught up in that, where I want to get a lot of fake Facebook likes. So I'll just go out and say, all right, I would like to go here, but I better go to the Edgartown Light because people like the Edgartown Light. And then you go to the Edgartown Light and, there's nothing, and you've got nothing. And it's not what it's supposed to be. What I do is I go out and I do use my best judgment and sometimes it's just where I need to be, like South Beach. I take a ton of South Beach pictures because I go with my dog there and I love it. She loves it there. And I just see what happens. If nothing happens, I go home. It was still better than, watching Jeopardy or something on TV. So I go and take what is there. And if there's nothing there, then I go home. I learned that when I try to overthink, I ruin it. And it's not fun anymore. And that's why I've never gotten bored taking pictures on Martha's Vineyard, because I go and see what is going to be given to me there. And am I open to it? Am I open to hearing what the messages are? My connection with my higher power, with spirituality, all those things become the important thing. And so if you've achieved that, then the pictures almost become secondary. Mm-hmm. So I don't go out like looking for a wave or looking for that. Sometimes I do, but I try to get off of that, like, I got to get a good picture. Really, it is, I got to get a good connection. I need to connect and with my sense of spirituality, and then the rest takes care of itself. And I keep telling people, you got to do it that way. Don't do it the other way. It runs out fast if that's all you're doing it for,
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Do you have an example of one that you just personally love yourself, aside from the little bird?
I like this one. This is a example of touching people. So this became one of my most popular photos. So I have a new dog, but my old dog died at 7 years old from leukemia. And this was the last set of footprints that we had together in the sand at South Beach. And I took this picture with tears and did some edits, and then I put it on Facebook and I told the story. The amount of people that got back to me was incredible, because people want to know they're not alone in their pain. So what I write about is not just addiction or, it's like real life stuff. And I just find that if you share this stuff with people, people don't want to know they're not alone. And sometimes just a shared experience is all that's that's there, but that's important. And so I take some of the moments in my life that are important and I share them with people, and it's really resonated and it's helped people. It's not all about just getting more likes. It's help people try to even deal with the issues that they're facing if they lost a pet. And I wrote a story about this in the book. And, there's so many different photographs that I take that represent, the storm photo. This was Alabama, and I took this because I was struggling at the time. I had been operated on, and they gave me oxycodone as a recovering alcoholic. And near the end, I restricted the amount of pills that I could get, but I started cutting the pills because I was no longer trying to address the pain. I was trying to make euphoria last longer. And I told that whole story on social media because there are so many people that worry about the same thing. And this picture was, the sobriety was the anchor holding here, but I was in the middle of a storm, and I told the whole story, and it helped so many people because I decided to do that. And so, these things, it's like that happened, but that picture came along at the same time. It's really cool that, like, when there's a story to be told, it seems like the picture comes, and I don't know how that all happens, but I'm happy it does.
Well, that actually ties right into, I was going to ask you what your creative process is for pairing a photo with a story or a memory. I've often wondered, as viewing your Facebook, I wonder if he had that thought before he went and took the photo, or did it come while you were taking the photo, or after? Like, how does that happen?
It's all a mishmash, but one thing I have never done, not a single time, I've never had a thought and then said, you got to go find a photo that's going to make it work. Never. I've never done that. Things just seem to happen, so often I'll take a picture and I'll come home and they say with photographers, you're supposed to take your best picture in the field and then you get ready to go. To me, the editing process is probably as important, if not more important, than taking the picture. And when I'm sitting there, like I'm looking at this boat and I'm editing, I'm thinking about what it was like when I was there. Thoughts go into my head, things happen. There might be some issues that I'm facing in the minute, like that oxycodone issue. And suddenly I put two and two together, and there comes the story. But I never force it, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's why sometimes people think I died because I haven't posted for a week. I get all these notes saying, "Are you still there? Are you okay? Okay. Yeah, give me a break. I didn't have a story today." And I'm not going to force it, just to keep it out there. And so it either is there or it's not. But the editing process, and this is something that has created, some issues in terms of the way people look at Photoshop and other things that, many people consider that to be the great evil. And for me and for other people that are trying to recover, people that use art for recovery, that's where the work gets done. When you're doing the editing, you're putting your heart and soul into the photo. And that's where, if you're trying to address issues and understand yourself better, that's where the work gets done. And that's why, again, I got a master's in psychology. There's something called phototherapy, where people use photographs to try to get at things they can't with their normal conscious thinking. And so the editing process is a place where lots of stories get born that I hadn't even thought of when I went out and took the picture. So I don't force things, and when I do, they come out really crappy. So I try not to do it too often.
So there was one that I told you recently made a big impact on me when I read it. I don't know if you have the picture tonight. It's the one.
Yes, ma'am.
The seagull on the post.
This is a photo that I took just the other day, and this is an example of sort of the creative process and how it works, in that I happen to be doing something in my basement at the same time this appeared. So a week and a half ago, I was down in the basement, and I kept all the records and all the notes and everything I was in 2 different rehabs, and I found the box, and it's like a scary box for me because you're going back through things that were really painful. So I was in a 30-day rehab, and I opened the box downstairs and I found the spiral bound notebook that I wrote everything that I needed to get out of my heart and head in order to get better. And in that 30-day period, I worked so hard, and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And the last day when I left, the counselors looked at my wife at the time and said, he doesn't get it. He's going to relapse. And I was fuming angry. I worked harder than any other person in that whole place. And he says, I'm going to relapse. I got news for him. So I go home, and 2 days later, I was arrested for drunk driving. 2 days. When I took this picture, I had just gone through the box, so I had that in my head. But when I saw this, I had in my head that it's a beautiful scene. It all looks wonderful. But I looked at the seagull and I said, it's black, it's dark. You can't make out anything in the seagull. And to me, the two came together, that you can, my conclusion in that story was that you can be book smart, head smart, but there's also heart smart. And it's one thing to write stuff down. It's another thing to feel it and love yourself and know that you can go forward. And so this photo looks like a beautiful photo to most people and whatever, but all I'm looking at is the darkness and the seagull, and the rest is fluff because I didn't get it. And so again, that was just the way that I interpreted the photograph. And I think it helped people. I got a lot of notes from folks that are in the same place where they don't understand why they keep relapsing and how they're doing and whatever, but they don't understand that there's more than just the intellectual side. It's the letting go. It's the, there's so much more to it. And so just another example of how a picture and some words have helped a lot of folks that have gotten back to me about that.
Yeah.
I think too much. I have too much, I do, like, right. So sometimes it's like, okay, give me a break. Sometimes I'm just going to take pictures of my feet. All right. And I'm going to post the feet on Facebook and just say, these are my feet. I didn't see God. They're just my feet.
You would still get a lot of likes, I'm sure. So this would be a good time if anyone has questions to throw them into the Q&A piece of part of the screen. But while people are thinking, let me ask if you have any advice for those who are trying to either work through addiction. How would you say an artistic pursuit might help them in recovery? And are there any tips you might offer people who haven't really discovered their inner artist yet?
And part of it, everybody has a cell phone, most everybody, and almost everybody takes pictures. As an example, there's cooking, there's painting, there's all sorts of other art forms for people. But what I find fascinating is that when people come in and they look at my artwork on the wall, they'll often pull a cell phone out and they'll say, I want to show you this picture I took. And then they're showing me the pictures, like usually Martha's Vineyard images, and they're, and it's really not very good. It's really not that good. And I don't really look at their picture. I look at them and I see them, and they're like, there's like something like, I own this. This gave me joy and I want to show it to you. I own this, and I'm going to say it's not that good, but I wouldn't be showing it to you if I didn't really love it. And I just watch them, and photographs are windows to the soul. And, if I stole some people's iPhones and I started looking at the pictures they were taking, I could tell a lot about them. And people, they'll leave it at that level. And sometimes, by using photographs and moving forward with what you're doing, like with me, I had no intention of doing this professionally. It just sort of happened. And I think people discount what they do sometimes instead of, again, do you have the courage or the desire to share what you think might be involved with a photograph with other people? There's a whole bunch of folks in the addiction community that suffer from stigma and shame and all those sorts of things. And sometimes the arts are a way to get at that in terms of coming to peace with who you are and what you need to do to get better. And so, often in recovery, especially once someone's made a decision to get sober, you can get people together with similar interests. Like there's cooking classes for people who are in recovery, yoga classes, that kind of thing. And it allows a forum where you're with people that are in the same place you are, but you're using these meditative and other mindful techniques to be able to stay sober. So, again, it's just a cool way to be able to get at, things that maybe aren't so visible.
Yeah. So, thank you for that, Michael. Chris, do we have any questions?
Yep, we do. So this is from Lynn Polcari. Can you talk more about your editing process, Lightroom, Photoshop, and do you use the editing to build your mood into the frame? I find your photos often convey mood, and that mood is what usually draws me in. She also said she just wanted to know that your messages of hope resonate with people who are dealing with other issues aside from addiction.
Yeah, and it's funny. When I started, because I do have a diagnosis of bipolar depression, and I've been on medication forever. But I remember when I started talking about that, people felt uncomfortable at first. That was almost more stigmatized than anything else. People were okay with alcoholism, but don't talk about bipolar disease. There might be something really wrong with you. You might be a murderer or something. But what I would do with Photoshop is to try to, like, for example, this wave picture. This is a giant wave. I ran back and forth on the beach trying to show that the sun can show through the biggest waves. And I wanted to get the sun right next to the fold of the wave. Well, guess what? The earth moves. And I only had a few minutes to do this. So I look like a crazy man running back and forth trying to get the damn picture of the sun. But when I put this into Photoshop, and I do use, I don't know if you're a photographer, I use Photoshop. I use a plugin called Nik, to do my editing. And I'll decide what I want to do with it. I try not to make it so weird that it's not, again, the original photo, you couldn't see any of this in here, because when you take a picture shooting at the sun, it blackens anything that's not as bright. And so when I brought the photo home, I didn't see any of this detail in here, and I had to bring that out. So sometimes the editing process is just showing what you really saw with your eyes. And, the pictures I showed at the beginning, which were hyper edited, it was so important for me to do that. Those were the pictures that were, and I used Photoshop. I used whatever tools I could get my hands on to try to make them look as like gnarly as possible, because that's the way I felt inside. And those pictures went in my first book. And then when the book sold out, I just republished it. And this is actually the cover photo of the new version. I changed all the photos and I put in all new ones. And sometimes I feel like, maybe I shouldn't have done that, because, in 2014, that's where I was in my journey as becoming a photographer. And I super edited everything. And when I looked at the book, I said, I can't put this out again like this. These photos are like ridiculous. But I guess that's left up to the observer. Some people said you should have kept the same photos because that's who you were. And it expressed all the stuff inside of you that you were trying to get out. You shouldn't have switched out all the newer, finer pictures that you put in a gallery. And to me, that's like the question that everybody needs to answer, right? I mean, now that I'm doing this professionally, you can't just take every hyper edited photo and sell it, because people look at it and say, what's wrong with you? So there's that mix, right? So there's a mix of what your goals are when you're doing the editing process. And it depends on what that end purpose is. And that depends on what stage you are in your recovery or other station in life, on what you're trying to create. I can go back and make these nasty photos like I did in 2014, but I'm not in a nasty place anymore. So I don't feel the need to do that. And so my pictures look different than they did then, when I was just trying to make my way back. But you can be gnarly too. So take Photoshop and make some nasty pictures. Do what you need to do to get it out of your system. All right.
Yeah, I think we have some more.
Yep. Another question from Jean Mooney. Do you have a favorite camera that you use? Do you carry multiple lenses and camera bodies?
I use the Nikon D850, which is the best that Nikon has. They have a new one now. The D850 is 3,000. The new Z is 6,000. I'm staying with the 3,000. And I'm a zoom lens guy. There are some professional photographers that only use prime lenses. They'll carry like 6 or 7 prime lenses, but I also enjoy wildlife photography. And so when I go into the field, I may be set up to do landscape, but then there may be a pterodactyl from the prehistoric times that everybody thought was extinct, and it flies across Long Point. I want to be ready to be able to get a picture of that bird at the same time. It makes it more exciting to me to do both. I don't want to just be known as a landscape or a wildlife photographer, but it makes it harder because you've got to carry the lenses and you have to know the technique to be able to switch between a landscape frame of mind and a fast moving object frame of mind. And when I teach my basic photography class, I try to show people in the class how to do that. So I carry usually 3 lenses with me in addition to my camera. And then I keep the other 15 lenses in the car. Yes, I have a lens addiction.
What version of Photoshop do you use? Is a question from Patricia.
Oh God, I don't know. It's whatever the one you pay for right now. The way Photoshop went online with, Adobe Creative Cloud. If you just go in, you put your $15 in, you get, it's a totally an online version now. They got you. There's no way off the hook. So I just use Creative Cloud. I use Adobe Bridge to store my photos, and that comes with a software known as Camera Raw, which is very much like Lightroom. And then I go from that into Photoshop, but I hardly use Photoshop. I use a plugin called Nik, N-I-K. It sits inside Photoshop, and that's where I do most of my editing. I don't do much editing with Photoshop. It's a little warped, but that's the way I learned it initially when I started, when Apple had something called Aperture. And I needed psychiatric help when they discontinued Aperture because I was freaking out. And I used Nik back then. And so I continue to use that going forward. But there's so many things you can use. I mean, don't think that that's like the magic. Go out and buy Nik. You don't need to do that.
Question from Jill Moran, one of our former Zullo board members. Where do you teach, Michael? She also asked about Adobe and Photoshop, but I think you and Lightroom, but you answered that question. So she'd like to know where you teach.
I teach right here. This is it. I was going to do it in the gallery, and then COVID hit, and I was going to do it just for people on Martha's Vineyard and do some field work and whatever. And then COVID. So I decided to make it a Zoom class, and it's just an intro. I want to get people off automatic. I install electric shock devices on cameras of these people. If they try to go on auto after my class, they get zapped. And but I've had students that it opened it up to more than Martha's Vineyard people. So right now I've got 40 more people signed up. I've had maybe 120 people go through the class. We try to have fun, try to get them off automatic. It's not for somebody that already has, a fair background in photography. It's fun because I love the challenge. It brings me back to when I hated cameras. I didn't understand them. I wanted nothing to do with it. And I look at it as a challenge to take all these people who feel exactly the same way and try to get them so that they can take better photos. So if you go out on Facebook right now, you'll see I'm just finalizing my February, March class. I've already got 40 people signed up for that, but it is a basic level. I haven't done a Lightroom or editing class or advanced photography, like, astrophotography, long exposure, that sort of stuff. That'll be next.
Just going to ask how long the classes are, how long a period.
There are 5 classes, 2 hours a night. So what we do is we do like Tuesdays for 5 weeks in a row, 6:30 to 8:30 at night. And we do them in consecutive weeks and try to get to the point where we get to the last class where I remember back in scuba diving, we had Helter Skelter, which was the last night where you had to show what you learned. And I I put different exercises together to try to have the students see if they can make the settings go where they think they need to be. And so it's hard on Zoom because you're not sitting there and, but you know what, damn it, I learned on YouTube, so they're going to need to do it too. So no excuses. Okay. But it seems to be really good. People love it. I have people that come back and want to take it again. I charge them more money because I say you didn't learn the damn thing the first time, so now you're going to pay more money the next time. But I think they genuinely just love the class, and I enjoy doing it.
There's another question in here, and then some just really nice sentiments that I'll read after this question. How do you know when a picture is a keeper, and what percentage of your photos do you consider keepers?
That's a really good question, because there are some photographs that I love and everybody else hates. So what do you do with that? And there are some that I can't, like I've sat doing my editing at night and I'll look at it and I'm playing with it and I'm doing it and I'm saying, there was one of the stupid moon coming out of the water. It looked like a half of it was just like a blob, just barely coming out of the water. And I said, I've done this so many times. It's just silly. And I said, what the hell? I'll put it on Facebook. It went like everywhere, like 100,000 people. I mean, sometimes one of my posts, I can see how many people touch it, 100,000, 200,000 people. But what does that mean? It means it's cool for people to see a moon that they never see that way, because I have a zoom lens. And they don't have a zoom lens. They have an iPhone. So they don't know that the moon can look that way coming out of the water. So there's two sides to this. One is the artistic side, and the other is just bringing joy to people by taking cool photos. And sometimes I just take things that I think are, I enjoy taking them, even though they're not going to hang on any art gallery wall, but I'll tell a joke, tell a story, and it makes people happy. But of all the photos I take, probably about 1% are keepers. I mean, and then I do put some on Facebook because I'm about ready to do the next calendar, and I'm going to be supporting the Vineyard House Sober Home. I've raised about $45,000 over the last 5 years with my calendars. And so I want to make sure people buy the calendar. And so I have people vote on the photos that are going to go in the calendar. And I learn a lot on what people find as attractive to them. And sometimes they're not so great for me. But if they're going to buy them and I'm going to raise money for a nonprofit, I'm going with what they want, not what I want. So it depends on the circumstance, right? So anyway, that's an example.
So this is from Lynette Cant. Michael, I have been fortunate to visit both your former gallery location and current location. Always such a special experience. As a teacher, I keep 3 small prints in my classroom on my bulletin board next to my desk. Super fan of your work and humanity. Thanks. Have to scoot out to put kids to bed. Thank you.
Nice.
This one is from Michelle Martin. I love how your photos show the rays of light shining through the clouds. I have a son who is an addict, and I struggle daily worrying about where he will end up. Your words and photography definitely brighten my day. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry you're going through that. But I try to show people, one of the things that you'll see through all my photographs is it's hard for me to take a calm photograph. I've gotten good at it. I have serene photos now. I have things like that. But in the beginning, I was trying to deal with the fact that I wanted everything just to be good. And then I came to the conclusion that if everything's good all the time, you don't learn, you don't get better. And I try to serve as an example. Like, her son is an addict. And, as a mother, she's sitting there wondering, is he going to get better? Is he going to get it? Can he, and so I try to tell my story because I have kind of like a bad story, and I'm happy, and I did it, and anybody can do it. And so, and I enjoy life. I love what I'm doing. And I want to be an example that continues to give that mother hope that her son can get it too. And to me, that's really where this all comes together. If you put me in this gallery and you said, Michael, you're going to stand here, people are going to come in and they're going to say, what medium was that printed on? And, that's, what was your camera settings? And okay, if I had to stand here and just sell pictures, I would quit. Not that it's not a bad thing, but to me, the real joy comes from the interaction with the people that come in. That's what really is my life's calling. My life's calling is not photography. My life's calling is to help people using photography as the language. The photography is the means. It is not the end. And it would never be the end. That's not how I look at it. So I don't mean to devalue photography because I love it, but that's the way it kind of works for me.
You're awfully good at it for not having that be the central focus.
Yeah, there's just one more comment here. Not so much a question, just a thank you. Every time I walk into your gallery or see your photos on IG, FB, Facebook, I am moved. It is one thing to be an amazing artist, which you certainly are, but another to be able to combine your art with messages of self-reflection, hope, and inspiration. I love that you share not just your photos and stories, but teach as well, and really enjoy seeing the photos of your adventures, your off Martha's Vineyard trips. I am looking forward to your life journeys in your new van, and thank you for your messages of hope. That's from Nancy P. So it's a good way to wrap up.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So if you, if there's anyone out there who's struggling with addiction and would want need some help, where would you send them?
Well, that's the most common question. Obviously, the last thing usually people will want to hear is go to an AA meeting, but that is the best place to go. I mean, you're uniformly welcomed in the absence of stigma and shame. If somebody is suffering and has nobody they can talk to about it, getting them to a meeting where there are people sitting in the room that have lived the exact same experience that they're living, it takes some courage. The most important thing is I have people contacting me from all over the country that say the same thing. I haven't told anybody, but I want you to know that I'm really going down from alcoholism or heroin addiction. And I sit there thinking, oh my God, he's telling me because he knows that I can't judge him or won't judge him because I've told my story. He's comfortable telling me because I've told the brutal detail of mine. We have to make it easier in the communities where people can feel comfortable saying to a neighbor or to a friend or to a sister or brother, I'm struggling. And so there's both sides of it, but certainly going to an AA meeting or an NA meeting can be a really important first step. The one thing that I ask is that before you contact me again, I want to know you've talked to one person, just one person. Take one step. Tell one person you're struggling, and then I want you to get back to me and I want you to tell me who that was. Because if you're going to take my time, you're going to give me something back. And so isolation and the secret is the killer. And so if you can get somebody to do one thing, it's an important first step. And then, obviously there are all sorts of options in terms of therapists and counselors and all that kind of stuff. But if you make it too big, it gets to be hard for an individual to do something. So take that first step. You've got AA, you've got other programs in the community. They even have home-based drug rehab now. So I've seen there's a service here in Massachusetts that does the rehab like over Zoom in your own home. So there's all kinds of options that didn't exist before.
Thank you. In the meantime, I think we've come to the end of the hour, and Michael, just really wanted to thank you for being so open and honest with us, like you always are. I think you probably gained a few more Facebook followers tonight, maybe even a few more folks will be in your gallery or in your classes soon, but the story you tell and what you do for people through your work is beyond measure. So thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you guys for having me. And everybody out there that I can see but can't see, thank you for being here. Okay. Appreciate it.
Yeah, there's some other really nice comments, Michael, in the chat too, that just interest of time, just in terms of people displaying your work, and also mentioning that for your own benefit, you should just put your feet up sometimes and tell people on Facebook that's what you're doing, so they don't worry about you. So
Amen.
But so these are just these are the resources, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, for anybody that needs resources or wants to support the effort. So that's NAMI.org. Michael had mentioned the Vineyard House, so vineyardhouse.org. For the creative inspiration, Michael's Crossroads Gallery is at 93 Dukes County Avenue in Oak Bluffs. And his website is blanchardphotomv.com. And the Zullo Gallery is at 456A Main Street in Medfield, and that's zullogallery.org. And Bill, do you want to wrap up and say anything about Zullo?
I would just like to thank you, Michael, very much for taking part in this very enlightening, very inspiring, really meaningful stuff. And Laura, thanks for being a great interviewer. It was a great evening. And Chris, thank you for putting together this entire program. I think a lot of people really benefited from it, and I think it's a great thing. So
Great.
thanks.
Thanks to everybody for coming tonight. It was
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Michael. This is great.
And I've decided to take the restraining order away. We're good. All right.
Just a matter of time.
I love you.
Oh, and just as another side note, we have another Meet the Artists coming up on February 17th. It's actually kind of an interesting segue from this one. It's a fiber artist, Jeanette Leanderstedt, she's Dutch, and she actually uses inspiration from the sea, including weaving with seaweed, to make the most amazing pieces of art and fiber creations. So anybody that's interested in that can tune in as well on the 17th, and you can look it up on the zullogallery.org website. The information is there. So, okay.
All right.
You guys are amazing.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. All right. Have a good night.
Yeah,
You
you
too.
too.
Thank
Thank
you all.
you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.